Thank you, John, for that kind introduction, and thank you for your leadership. The work that you do in the Dallas Children's Advocacy Center is the gold standard. For those of you who are not familiar with the incredible work that they do, they really are the industry leader in the delivery of services to children in their time of greatest need. And as they approach their 30th anniversary, they have now helped more than 50,000 children and their families to find justice, hope, and healing. It is an incredible honor for me to be part of the 30th anniversary of the world's preeminent Crimes Against Children conference. People from all over the world convene here every August because we share a common mission of doing everything in our power to protect our kids and children all over the planet. I'll never forget my first time I sat in this audience. It was 17 years ago. I was a newly minted Crimes Against Children agent. I had no idea what I was doing yet. And I came here in hopes that I could at least learn what to do with an IP address. And back then, we were pretty much only dealing with static IPv4s that usually led you right to the offender's front door. The things that I learned and the people that I met that week have stayed with me to this day. 3 decades ago, the CACC, founding mom and dads, Leanne, Ken, Brian, Bill, they all came together to organize a training for a small group of law enforcement officers. There might have been 35 people, including instructors. And they talked about things like SIDS and how to interview child abductors. Fast forward 30 years, their brainchild has grown into the world's largest and most significant Crimes Against Children conference with 5,000 attendees and volunteers, 300 speakers, and nearly 500 workshops and labs. We're talking about things like sexting, cyberbullying, revenge porn, and cell phone forensics. Issues and threats we couldn't have even imagined back then. It's hard to believe how much things have changed since our first conference. For those of you in the room who are old enough, think back to 1988. What did the world look like? What were you wearing at the time? How high was your hair? Ladies, were there scrunchies and neon jelly bracelets involved? And for the men out there, maybe a members-only jacket? I can see a lot of cringing faces, and I can certainly relate. In 1988, the groundbreaking computer game Tetris had just made its US debut, and the theme song is probably still stuck in your heads. Remember these? In 1988, the 5 1/4 Apple Disk II was introduced. Its formatted storage capacity was a whopping 157 kilobytes. Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up was playing on every radio station. And it was also the heyday of 80s police movies, classics like Beverly Hills Cop, Police Academy, Die Hard, and one of my favorites, the award-winning RoboCop. The award was for sound editing, but still. And think about what we hadn't even heard of yet. A browser, an email, a search bar, a selfie. The World Wide Web was still 3 years away, and of course, companies like Google, Snapchat, YouTube, Dropbox, Facebook didn't even exist. In fact, some of the founders and CEOs were still in nursery school, and some had not even yet been born. DNA evidence was still also in its infancy. In 1988, a man named Tommy Lee Andrews had just become the very first person in the US to be convicted using a DNA fingerprint of his blood. He appealed that conviction on the grounds that DNA was novel and unreliable. That's how new the technology was at that time. Needless to say, things look pretty different today. DNA is now considered the gold standard in criminal evidence, and it's becoming more sophisticated all the time. There is now a zettabyte of data processed every year on the internet. A zettabyte. What is a zettabyte? Basically, it's a really, really big number with lots and lots of zeros. It's like filling 34.3 billion smartphones to capacity, which, if laid end to end, would be enough to circle the Earth 121 times. Today, Never Gonna Give You Up is not just an oldie, but it is synonymous with internet trolling. Has anyone been rickrolled lately? And RoboCop isn't even science fiction anymore, it is a reality. The first fully automated police officer is already patrolling the streets in Dubai. And by 2030, some estimates say robots will make up 1/4 of the country's police force. It is going to take me a minute to fully comprehend this. In my mind, I still see hammer drones from Iron Man 2. These were the unmanned combat drones created by Ivan Vanko, based on Justin Hammer's failed attempts to recreate Tony Stark's Iron Man armor. Vanko changed the design from man suits to remote-controlled drones, arguing that, in his words, people make problem. Every facet of our society has been touched by rapid technological change, and law enforcement is no exception. When this conference started, the primary technology most police officers had was a janky car radio, and if a department was really forward-leaning, they acquired the hottest new thing on the market, the fax machine. Today, departments across the country have multi-channel police scanners, dashboard cameras, traffic monitoring radar units, in-car data terminals, gunshot detection technology, and yes, even robots. The list goes on and on. Maybe more important than any of that, law enforcement is part of a mushrooming information ecosystem, one that generates more data than ever before and that grows exponentially larger, faster, and more effective all the time. It's amazing when you think about how dramatically communication speed and methods have evolved in a relatively short period of time, especially when it comes to how we get the word out about missing and exploited children. 1988 was also the year that a little show called America's Most Wanted debuted on Fox and changed the world of crime fighting forever. Just 4 days after it first aired, a viewer tip led to the capture of a convicted killer, an FBI top 10 fugitive who had escaped from prison. Within months, the show became a nationwide phenomenon. America's Most Wanted was more than just a hit TV show. It was the embodiment of two powerful ideas: the notion that we all have a role to play in keeping our communities safe, and the power of partnerships. That through collaboration and innovative thinking, civilians and law enforcement can work together to solve crimes. As I've said many times, partnerships are the keys to solving crimes. Partnerships across and between law enforcement agencies, private industry, NGOs, child safety organizations, the medical and legal communities, everyone who has an interest in protecting children. AMW highlighted an incredibly powerful three-way partnership: law enforcement, the media, and people from all over the United States who want to help make their world a safer place. I want to share an example of this partnership and how it affected me when I was an FBI agent working Crimes Against Children Matters. My squad had developed and launched a brand new project called ECAP, the Endangered Child Alert Program. For the first time in the FBI, we were able to take child abuse images where the perpetrator had his or her face clearly visible in the image, present the case to a federal grand jury, and obtain an indictment for a John or Jane Doe for the production of child pornography. We had no idea where the suspect was or where he or she could be found. This was groundbreaking, but there was one small problem. We have a warrant, now what? The year was 2004. I had a picture of some guy and no technology like facial recognition or other tools to help me figure out who he was. This is where a partnership and John Walsh saved the day. We approached John, and as we were explaining what we wanted to do, he said yes before we could even finish our pitch. We had a picture of a person sexually exploiting a child. We had an arrest warrant, and he had a nationwide television program with millions and millions of avid fans and armchair detectives. It was a match made in heaven. I was the first agent to appear on John's show to represent the ECAP program, and on a cold night in February 2004, AMW aired the stories of John Doe number 1 and John Doe number 2. I remember thinking as I watched the episodes air while sitting at the AMW call center, is this really gonna work? And then the calls started coming in and I couldn't believe it. Within a matter of minutes, we had John Doe number 2 identified. I had been looking for him for 2 years. I had no idea at the time that AMW had quite a following in prisons. Did you know that? We received a call from an inmate who wanted to let me know that John Doe number 2 was his cellmate, so case closed. The following week, we re-aired the John Doe number 1 case, and within a few minutes, I took a call, and I will never forget the conversation. A police officer identified himself and said he was a cop in Lolo. I said, where's that? And he said, it's near Missoula. And being a total New Yorker, I asked him to be a little more specific, and he very politely said, it's in the state of Montana. He proceeded to tell me that he was standing in a supermarket parking lot, and he had a guy in front of him because the man's mother was watching America's Most Wanted, saw her son, and called 911. The officer said that he ran the man's name through NCIC, but he didn't get a hit, which of course makes sense because we had an arrest warrant for him in the name of John Doe number 1. To make a long story short, I spent the next 2 years working on this case and several spin-off cases. John Doe number 1 had information on a serial child abuser who, unlike himself, was savvy enough to cover his face in all of the abuse images that he had shared online, so we were never able to identify him or put him on America's Most Wanted. Thanks to John Doe number 1, I was able to find him. He was a 3-time convicted child sex abuser who was currently in prison with 1 week left to go on his sentence on an unrelated child sexual assault case. Thanks to John Walsh and America's Most Wanted, that man never got to celebrate his release date. Yes. Thank you. Yep. That man is now a 4-time convicted child sex offender who received a federal sentence of life without the possibility of parole. The partnership between law enforcement, the media, and the public made this possible. Partnerships, communication, and technology. Another example that will be very familiar to everyone in this room was the development of a new system to bring children home that was born right here in Dallas-Fort Worth in 1996. Broadcasters teamed up with local police to launch the Amber Alert system in memory of 9-year-old Amber Hagerman. And the partnerships have grown from radio stations to television, highway billboard alerts, and now into something much bigger. And as a direct result of this program, to date, nearly 1,000 children have been safely reunited with their families. Today, distribution channels are broader and faster than ever, and so are the opportunities to work together. Millions of Americans are being notified about the highest risk missing children in real time without even looking up from the cell phone in their hands. In 2015, we launched the Facebook Amber Alert program to help send the most critical case information, including photographs of the missing child, to people who are in the search area, who are in the best position to help find the child. Since then, we've expanded our program to 18 countries with the goal of bringing the alert everywhere so that no matter where a child lives, he or she will have the opportunity to be found quickly. Another incredible example of how partnerships can help protect children took place just this past May in Menlo Park, California. Facebook hosted the 3rd annual Child Safety Hackathon, where more than 100 engineers and data scientists representing more than a dozen companies came together to solve a very complicated problem. They worked to develop technical solutions to combat child sex trafficking. While there were many amazing tools created over the 48-hour hackathon, there was only one selected as the winning prototype, and it is my privilege to be able to make this announcement here publicly for the first time today. A team of 8 hackers comprised of employees from 3 different companies, are the winning team for their creation of a tool that pairs clustering analysis with new search tools to identify people who are trafficking children and then follow their movements across different platforms as they use the internet. I'd like to recognize Ian, Shravanti, Sunny, and Scott from Uber, Luca, Reshef, David from Facebook, and Anne-Marie from Two Hat Securities. This team's work will help identify victims, and law enforcement will be able to more quickly rescue them and bring their abusers to justice. Congratulations to this amazing team and to all of those who participated. We look forward to next year's event and to see what developments in technology will do for the child protection community. The bottom line is this: new technology is our friend, and partnerships make it work. Don't fear it, embrace it, master it, create it, use it to make our world safer. And I know that this is easier said than done. New technology can be slow to catch on, especially when a standard protocol has been decades in the making. But doing things a certain way because that's the way they've always been done isn't good enough. Not when children continue to go missing and are exploited every single day. So it's up to everyone in this room to make the most of the tools that are coming available and keep looking towards the future. Which raises the question, what does the future look like? Where will innovation take us next? There are so many emerging technologies. They have the potential to revolutionize police work and to protect children. Augmented and virtual reality are already helping police train for real-world scenarios like hostage negotiations and active shooter situations. Artificial intelligence is also enhancing real-time policing and jump-starting old investigations. In the US, tech companies are partnering with police to develop AI for body cameras that will help identify suspects or find missing kids in a crowd. Technology will get smarter by taking more data in over time. In the UK, police are piloting a system that will help piece together what might have happened at a crime scene. The software scans millions of police records, interviews, pictures, and videos. Then it uses that information to generate plausible leads about how, when, and why a crime has taken place. In the Netherlands, police are currently digitizing 30 million pages of records in their cold case files. A machine learning algorithm will comb through those records to figure out which cases have the most promising evidence. That will take case processing time down from several weeks or months to a single day. Genetic genealogy is also proving to be a transformative tool. In April, after decades without a breakthrough, the Golden State Killer case was finally solved with the help of a genealogist and an open source ancestry site. In a Hail Mary attempt to crack the case, detectives uploaded the suspect's DNA profile into a public site that contains about 1 million genetic profiles that people have uploaded and shared after using services like 23andMe. This led police to some distant relatives of the suspect. From there, genealogists helped them hone in on the suspect himself, finally leading to an arrest. The break in the Golden State Killer case has led to a flurry of new developments in cold cases. The very first year this conference was held, 1988, an 8-year-old girl named April Tinsley had been abducted and brutally murdered in Indiana. The killer left taunting messages confessing to the crime and threatening to kill again, and yet no suspect could be found. It was a tragedy that tormented April's family and her community for 3 decades. But just last month, everything changed. In May, Fort Wayne police sent the DNA to a company called Parabon Nanolabs, the same company that helped identify the Golden State Killer. A genealogist was able to narrow the possible suspects down to just 2 people, a pair of brothers. That led police to a man who lived in a tiny town just 6 miles from where April's body had been found. The police knocked on his door a few weeks ago and asked if he knew why they were there, and he said, April Tinsley. Companies like Parabon are also helping police through emerging technologies like genetic phenotyping. Yesterday, this was science fiction. Today, this exists. In the old days of DNA collection, scientists needed a rather large, clean sample to be able to make a one-to-one comparison. Today, with the incredible advances in this science, they only need 1 nanogram of material. A way to visualize this is to say, imagine cutting a penny in half, and then cutting half of that in half, and then cutting that half in half, and you keep doing that 31 times. That'll get you down to a nanogram. As a result, scientists can now take minuscule samples of DNA from crime scene, like a couple of skin cells. And with genetic phenotyping, they can scan it for variations that unveil traits like skin color, eye color, and even freckling. They can plug those markers into an algorithm to generate a sketch and show what the person might look like, all from a nanogram of genetic material. One of their next projects, coming soon, is the ability to take those couple of skin cells and tell you the age of the person who left them behind. Can you imagine how useful this will be to law enforcement? Parabon has already announced 5 success stories with genetic phenotyping, a service that they launched 3 months ago. And get this, the average age of the case solved is 30 years. These breakthroughs are nothing short of remarkable and would have been unimaginable when this conference began 30 years ago. But the fact is, technology alone will never be enough. It takes the tireless efforts of law enforcement to keep these cases open, to pursue these partnerships, and recognize the potential of technological innovations to solve new cases and revive old evidence. After all, 30 years ago, when detectives were collecting evidence in April's case, they had no idea they were collecting the DNA that would ultimately solve the case. Back then, the science didn't exist, but it was on the way. And that is why I have so much hope for the future. I have hope that another 30 years from now, the technologies that we think of as science fiction today will become science fact. Never give up, never stop learning, never stop innovating, and never stop using your creativity and your imagination. Something we don't often hear in law enforcement circles, but should. There's a story that I love by the Brazilian author Paulo Coelho. One morning, a father was reading his newspaper, but his young son wouldn't stop bothering him. So in his frustration, he ripped a page out of the paper that had a map of the globe on it, tore it into pieces, and gave it to his son. There. See if you can put the world back together, the father told his son, who scurried off to complete the task. The father figured that the task would keep his son busy for a while. But the boy returned just a few minutes later with the map fully pieced together. "How did you do that so fast?" he asked in astonishment. "Have you been studying geography?" "What's geography?" the boy replied. There was a photo of a little girl on the other side of the page. So I put the girl back together and found that I'd put the world back together too. So much of the time, the task before us seemed daunting, even impossible. But if we take the time to adjust our perspectives and to think outside the box, there's no limit to the complex problems we can solve together. A tiny clue or piece of evidence you pick up at a crime scene might appear meaningless at the moment, but thanks to additional perspectives technology is giving us every day, it very well could end up solving the case. We must never stop innovating, we must never stop collaborating, and we can never give up, no matter how difficult the work is or how cold the trail may seem. Because everyone in this room knows how dark and broken the world can seem sometimes. But oftentimes, a small sliver of light is all it takes to illuminate the darkness. By working together, we can bring a little light back into the families' lives and start putting some of the pieces back where they belong. I am so proud of all the work that we've tackled together in the past. I am so thankful to be here with you this week, and I can't wait to see what we accomplish together over the next 30 years and beyond. Thank you all so much, and have a great week here in Dallas. Thank you. I get to introduce you. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay. It is now my honor to be able to introduce my friend John Walsh. I've known John for a pretty long time, and it was because of him that I probably made one or two or maybe three of the biggest cases of my career. I've never met a man with more passion for what he does, and he really has the biggest heart. So with that, I'd like to introduce John Walsh.